You can read from where it says both men, and you can comment thereafter.
Well, this is misleading because it says both men were recommended. Only one person was recommended, not both men.
And this is in line with your testimony corroborated by the documents which I referred to today, that there was only one recommendation.
One recommended person all the way through.
May I refer you to page 98? So while you're still on page 97, the sixth line that starts with an ANC deployment committee, if you can read there and comment. 97.
97, sorry, I thought it was 98.
97.
ANC
I think it's the sixth line.
was also, I don't know, I have no knowledge of who opposed Gama, that person.
Yes. Now, may I refer you to page 98? You can read the first and the last paragraphs and comment on them.
This is now the ANC Youth League. So the first, one of the media statements is on the 30th. The ANC Youth League issues a statement on September the 11th saying the African National Congress Youth League calls for the immediate appointment of Siyabonga Gama as the Group CEO of Transnet. There is evidently a concerted agenda by the predominantly white board of directors and external role players to isolate Siyabonga Gama from Transnet and deny him the position of Group CEO of Transnet despite his credentials. Recurrently, Africans are denied positions of responsibility in key and strategic sectors of the economy, and we should never egg walk around this absolute reality. And then it goes on to say, Siyabonga Gama should be appointed as a Group CEO and business go on as usual in Transnet. Any attempt to persecute and isolate him will be met with massive resistance from the youth of South Africa.
And these are some of the pressure that you see it was exerted upon you at the time,
yeah,
and the board.
And the board, yes.
Now, may I refer you to page 101? You can identify that document, read it, and you can also comment on it.
Now, this is the South African Communist Party releasing a statement a couple of days before the ANC Youth League on the 7th of September, saying that, this is a statement, the SACP has noted the recent developments within Transnet and the subsequent suspension of Siyabonga Gama. We wish to express serious concerns about what appears to be an attempt by certain elements within and outside of Transnet to clearly frustrate the appointment of Mr. Gama as a CEO, despite his illustrious career, commitment to public service, and strong credentials.
Let's go to page 101.
That is
That's the same thing,
it's a
yes.
duplicate, yeah.
It's a duplicate. It's page 108. It's headed Gama being persecuted like Zuma. Are you there?
I'm just allocating it, 107. This is on September the 13th in the Sunday Times business page, and the quote is, Gama being persecuted like Zuma. Minister of Communications and ANC heavyweight, General Sipiwe Nyanda, says suspended Transnet executive Siyabonga Gama is being persecuted in the same manner as Jacob Zuma. He's a young man, Very few people are as capable or as suitable as he is. The challenge is that some people out there are really bent on ensuring that he is destroyed. What happened to Jacob Zuma, to Jay-Z, is happening in this case. People vilify and cast aspersions on you.
The last one on page 113.
This is from the South African Transport and Allied Workers Union. It was issued by the General Secretary, Randall Howard. Sitawu has become aware of the suspension of Gama effected on the 1st of September. Sitawu is convinced that the suspension is informed by a dirty tricks campaign.
You are reading the one on Annex G 111, is it?
On 111.
Yes, okay, proceed.
Yes, yeah. Is a dirty campaign to discredit him publicly and rule him out as the most suitable candidate. We also question the timing of the charges. And then it goes on, Sitawu is reliably informed that the Carlton Center cabal, and how often are we hearing that word cabal, that the Carlton Center cabal, led by the acting GCEO, Chris Wells, with a direct link to former GCEO Maria Ramos, is hell-bent on ensuring that Gama does not get that job. And it goes on and on. Sitawu, and then at the end here, the last paragraph, Sitawu will ensure that no puppet appointment takes place until the disciplinary process of Gama is completed, even though at the cost of keeping the untransformed cabal in place a little longer. And, you know, that is the tone of it. Might I just say that COSATU, as a federation, never once engaged publicly on this matter. I had briefed Zwelinzima Vavi, and he concurred with me that there were, you know, this issue was problematic. So although the Transport Union, who, you know, have members in Transnet, issued a statement, COSATU was the one part of the tripartite alliance that did not follow suit as the others had done.
And we have also Annexure H on 113. This also captures the history, and it's captured, it's headed Middling with Transnet Matters.
Yes. This is an editorial
Yes.
of the City Press of September the 13th, 2009, headed, as you say, Meddling with Transnet Matters. It starts off with saying, the level of political interference at Transnet does not bode well for the effective management of parastatals. At last count, the presidency, the ANC headquarters, Minister Jeff Radebe, the ANC Youth League, and the Trade Union Federation, when that is incorrect, it was just Sitawu, had all insisted that the Transnet board appoint suspended executive Siyabonga Gama as the chief executive. It is an unprecedented level of political pressure exercised on what is supposed to be a board appointed by government, but which operates with autonomy and respect for its professionalism and its expertise. And then it starts to speculate what is at stake here. Obviously, certain business associations with Minister Radebe, whatever, I won't go into those. But it ends off by saying, and that's the third paragraph from the bottom, the question of who is right or wrong is really not for the ANC to determine. Neither is it terribly good practice to level the race card at the board and the executive team at Transnet. The board is diverse and its non-executive directors include Christine Ramon, Nunu Nchingila, and Peter Moyle. Their reputations are being sullied, and it will be little surprise if they walk in the next week. Also in a tight spot is Public Enterprises Minister Barbara Hogan, who has to make the nomination of the Transnet Chief Executive to Cabinet. Caught between her party and the board, she is damned if she does and damned if she doesn't.
Do you wish to comment on that?
Very true. I have not included how, in later times, during this period, the kind of newspaper articles that were produced, allegedly quoting insiders, people in the know, all of those. Besides myself, Mr. Wells was also targeted, the Transnet board. As regards to myself, there were often headline stories in a particular Sunday newspaper which said I did not have the confidence of the cabinet, that I must go, that I'm going to be taken out. And it was, nothing related to what my experience was. But how I experienced that was an enormous amount of pressure being put on me publicly to accede to what whoever was doing this, to accede to their demands. There was a point at which I was informed that certain members of senior black management of Transnet would walk out if Mr. Gama was appointed. Now, Chair, this is a company. This is not a two-bit little show. This is a company that's extremely important for the country. I counted no less 18 times in 6 months that the Transnet board tried to engage government, myself, my predecessors. They even went to President Motlanthe, Deputy President Motlanthe, to make a decision about the board and the CEO. Would any shareholder withhold and postpone and not appoint a board for not appoint these critical positions for over a year? No. How are we treating senior professional people who we've appointed to a board and treat them as though they are part of a conspiracy to do whatever is evil and wrong and against transformation? That board, majority was black, very fine people, and yet they were castigated. Yet, and you can see here that some of them were already talking to the media and saying, this is ruining me, my reputation. I will have to move on. And in fact, 4 did resign. And to the credit of others, they stayed on, and to the credit of the people who were in the acting positions, who often had to be in the firing line non-stop, they stayed on. It is unacceptable. And that is why I do feel that this commission does need to look at the issues of how boards are appointed, what level of autonomy, what level of professionalism engaged, and how we respect people. But it's not only boards. There's a person like Sipho Maseko. He is already running a major parastatal. The share price has shot up since he took over. What are we saying to Sipho Maseko, a completely competent manager who's come flying through the tests, that is not good enough because, for some reason, the ANC doesn't see him as one of them. Not that he's, I'm not saying not as one of them as a member, but somehow refuses to respect him as a person. And this went on time and time again. This notion that there's an in-house and there's an out-house, and the way to pursue your career is to walk a beaten path to Luthuli House and ingratiate yourself with the party. And I do think we need to look at that relationship between the state and the party, and the way that people are being mobilized to spread falsehoods and defamation.
To your knowledge, as at that time, had it ever happened that in regard to the appointment of a CEO of a parastatal SOE, members of cabinet should go out publicly and make the kinds of statements that I understand were made by some of your cabinet colleagues in regard to another colleague's portfolio?
It's unheard of that you would implicitly attack another cabinet colleague, insist on the decision that you can criticize a cabinet colleague and say, well, there's within bounds, but I don't agree or whatever, or I have reservations. But to say this cabinet colleague will appoint someone. In fact, the matter was taken to the public protector at the time. The public protector ruled, in the case of Minister Nyanda, that he had contravened the Executive Ethics Act in that he had leveraged his position as a minister to benefit people who were close or whatever. And the president was told that he had to reprimand Minister Nyanda, and when asked in Parliament whether he had reprimanded Minister Nyanda, he simply said, yes, I've reprimanded him. Yes, it's I remember several cabinet ministers coming to me and saying they were shocked at the way that fellow cabinet ministers were going out into the public domain. Neither of them ever spoke to me, but went out into the public domain and were, lobbying. And that's the only word you can say, lobbying for a candidate.
Do you know whether those cabinet colleagues of yours, as well as all the other organizations or people who are referred to in the newspaper articles that you have referred to, whether they were aware that there was a selection process that had to be followed, that had been followed by the board, a board, as you say, that was, and the majority of whom were black, and that there was a black candidate who had been recommended. Did you know whether they were all aware of this, or were there just some stories told that suggested that it was either Mr. Gama and a white candidate? Not necessarily
I'm
that
not
if it,
party
not,
to
not
the
necessarily
knowledge,
that
but
if it was a white candidate, it would be justified. But I'm just looking at some of the things I've read, which some of the people seem to used to justify why they said it should be Mr. Gama?
The Deputy Minister, Enoch Godongwana, often had to be at Luthuli House because he was chairing the Economics Transformation Subcommittee, and would engage there, in an informal basis. He was of the same view as I held. We both met with the Secretary General of the ANC. We wanted to know why he was insisting on Gama. We explained all of this, and he was absolutely adamant that Gama was being persecuted and that they would not accept anyone else but Gama. Whereas
Even after you had
Even
told
after
him
I
about
explained it.
Maseko and his credentials
Yes.
and so on?
Oh, yes, oh, yes. As I say, I had spoken to Deputy President Motlanthe, and he agreed with me. And I had also briefed Zwelinzima Vavi as part of the Tripartite Alliance, and he also agreed with me. But from within the ANC, it was absolutely Gama or no one else. And I must take into consideration that perhaps they did genuinely believe that he was being persecuted. But then when presented with not evidence, but the full story, you should then at least realize that there's a bigger story here. And I was disappointed that they didn't realize that.
I can understand an attitude that says there's a certain candidate who is being unfairly excluded from the process, an attitude that says something must be done to make sure that there's a fair process which allows everyone who is eligible to compete. That's obviously different from saying it doesn't matter what process is followed, it should be so and so. That's different. But
Yes.
I would, it would be surprising if people in senior positions, whether in government or in organizations, in a process which by law is required to be fair, were to basically say we don't care about the merits or demerits of other candidates, it should be so and so. Because from what you say, it seems to me that that's the effect of what you are saying was the former president's attitude. And you must tell me if I'm wrong. That seems to be the effect of what you are saying was the then Secretary General's attitude as well. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yes, look, the Secretary General would endorse a fair process of a disciplinary process. But it was my impression that he believed that Siyabonga Gama would prove himself completely innocent in this.
Okay, I think it's important to appreciate nuances here. You might be bringing in a nuance that is important. It was your understanding that as far as the Secretary General was concerned, he wanted there to be a fair process that would include Gama, but that if Gama was appointed, he should be appointed through a fair process when other people compete.
No, that the disciplinary process would be a fair process.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Okay.
and so don't appoint anyone until that disciplinary process is over.
Yes, but after that disciplinary process, what your understanding was that he was saying that Gama should be appointed.
Yes.
Not that there must still be competition.
No, Gama must
Yes.
then be the candidate, yes.
And like the former president, he also didn't have any criticism for Mr. Masego's credentials.
No.
Thank you.
Ms. Hogan, I have referred you to a number of media articles and you have commented on them. Can I find out from you whether did you react at all to all these statements that were that I've actually taken you through? Did you have a chance to comment on them?
I did not comment. You know, I felt a lot of this was fake news. It was clearly a lobby. And it would have been undignified and counterproductive to go out in a public domain and have public slanging matches with people.
Now, those media articles or reports are attributed to a number of individuals and organizations, you know, who were, some of them were ministers at the time, Minister Jeff Khadebe, Spiwe Nyanda, and it refers to the ANC Youth League, and the list goes on. Do you know whether those individuals or the entities, did they ever deny what was attributed to them, to them in those articles?
Not to my knowledge. To the president's, you know, when the president, can I just say one thing? When the president was questioned by reporters at one stage, journalists, whether it was correct that Sipiwe and that other ministers get involved in this, the president said no, they should not be involving themselves in this. So he also appreciated that they'd gone out of their mandate.
So you must have been under enormous pressure to appoint Mr. Kama at the end of his disciplinary process. Maybe the outcome made things a little easier for you, but you must have been under extreme pressure.
I was under extreme pressure. I had to attend National Executive Committee meetings, not National Executive Committees, but NECs and meetings of the Tripartite Alliance. And some people were very, very nasty to me at those meetings. Not that I can't take that. And what really offended me was that I was cast as an anti-transformation racist who did not appreciate the necessity for transformation in this country. And that really offended me. I expected better from my colleagues. Colleagues who knew my history. Jeff Khadebe was the General Secretary of the ANC, I think the Southern Natal region, when I was General Secretary of Gauteng. People knew my engagement and my involvement. And I saw the lengths then to which people will go in their ambitions for whatever, to destroy other people. And today we see it in full force in our public domain, that we will destroy people to get our own way. And I'd expected the president to protect me. Inasmuch, you know, you saw President Mandela, President Mbeki in particular, even though it was a minister that no one agreed with, the Minister of Health, he defended her. He defended Minister Manuel when he was under fire. But in these instances, the president hung me out to dry.
Between the time when you said to the former president in a meeting with him, in effect, that, or when you refused to appoint Mr. Gama, and then he said, let's wait for the disciplinary process. Your refusal, your attitude then, did it obtain right throughout as long as Mr. Masego was a candidate, or did it ever change?
No, I did await the outcome of a disciplinary hearing. But once that outcome, once he was found guilty on 3 counts and was dismissed on all 3 counts, the deputy minister and myself initiated a process to appoint a new Transnet board. And that was then a year after all of this happened, and it was then towards July, August 2010. And my thinking then was that you don't go and appoint a CEO when this board is already, it's time for it to, for the certain recycling to take place, and then let the board initiate a new search and a new process and let us go ahead. So I never went to appointing someone else or anything like that, no.
Okay, I see the time, Mr. Mukwena, and I'm sure you wanted to draw that to my attention some time back already. We lost about 20 minutes earlier. If it's convenient to the witness and to everybody, I would like us to see if we can carry on until 4:30 to make up for that time. So let me start with Ms. Hogan. Would that be convenient to you?
That's convenient.
Thank you. Mr. Mukwena?
There are some murmuring, Mr. Chair, because always after 4 o'clock, we have other witnesses that we have to engage with in preparation for other sittings.
Other members of the legal team can be excused who might need that. Do you have to be there before 4:30?
There's an application that we have to speak about with Mr. Maleka that we supposed to be argued for tomorrow.
Oh.
You would recall. So if I could divide myself into 2, Mr. Chair. I'm told that we'll deal with it at 10 o'clock in the evening today. We'll deal with it at 10 o'clock tonight with Mr. Maleka. So we can proceed for now, Mr. Chair. Yes.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you to everybody. Let's continue until 4:30. Thank you, Ms. Hogan.
Ms. Hogan, I posed a question to you earlier on whether were you able to react to those public or to those media reports?
No.
And you said no. May I refer you to page 102? Because there seems to be an article which is attributed to you responding to what was happening at the time so that we can be able to clear up that issue. Page 102.
Yes.
If you look on the second column towards the middle, it says when Gama was suspended. Can you see that?
Yes.
When Gama was suspended on September, I think 1, Hogan said the Transnet board would run the disparity process and inform the shareholder, the government of the outcome and any decision to be taken. Does this quote you correctly?
Yes.
So we did at least react to that one.
Yes, it wasn't in response to
those, yes.
Yeah.
Just want to find. Now, while we are on that page 102, let's go back to 102. and I want you to comment on that. It says that the Public Enterprise Minister, Barbara Hogan, faces crunch time tomorrow after being called to appear before Parliament to explain her handling of the succession process at Transnet and the suggestion of Siyabonga Gama, CEO of Transnet Freight Rail Division. Do you wish to comment about that?
Yes, Fehi Mentor, who was a chairperson then of the Parliamentary Committee on Public Enterprises, summons me to Parliament to please explain why I was not appointed, to explain what was happening with the appointment process. So I went to Parliament.
Are you at liberty to share with us as to what was the outcome of that session?
Well, the ANC members of that committee and other members from other parties were of the view that this was a matter that, if not sub judice, this was an internal matter within Transnet, and it should be allowed to continue its processes. So I was not really engaged on that matter.
All right. We know that Mr. Gama did challenge his suspension before the High Court.
Yes, Mr. Gama then challenged his suspension in the High Court, and he lost. He wanted his suspension set aside, and he lost that in the High Court.
May I refer you to page 114?
Mm. 110.
114.
Oh, 114, sorry. Yes, that was a letter, yeah.
And we know also that he brought a challenge. The challenge that we're talking about is the one on page. Starting from page 114.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes on up until page 161.
Correct.
And if you go to page 114, Mr. Chair, I'm referring the witness back to page 114. And paragraph 2 captures some of the essence of the application. It says that on the 1st September 2009, Mr. Maharaj, who is the Group Executive, Human Resources of Transnet Limited, took the decision to institute disciplinary proceedings against Mr. Gama and to suspend him on full pay until either the disciplinary process was finalized or until the suspension was lifted. So is that correct, that that was the decision of Mr. Maharaj at the time? Ms. Hogan? Yes.
Well, Mr. Mantash, I think
Maharaj.
was concerned that he'd been suspended.
Yes, but I'm referring to paragraph 2.
Maharaj, oh. Yes.
Are you on page
Yes.
114? Yes, I'm saying that in relation
Yes.
to paragraph 2,
Yes.
that decision to suspend and to discipline Mr. Gama was the decision which was made at the time by Mr. Maharaj, according to the papers.
Yes.
Now,
So Mr. Gama had not been suspended by the board. The decision to suspend him had been taken by Mr. Maharaj. Or is there something that you would not have known?
Let me just remember this.
This judgment of the High Court by Judge Spilk suggests that in terms of the papers that were placed before the High Court,
Yes.
that decision seems to have been taken by Mr. Maharaj.
Yes, there was a whole, Mr. Gama contested the authority of Mr. Maharaj to conduct the disciplinary processes. Although the board had appointed Mr. Wells to follow up, and Mr. Wells in turn had conferred the authority to conduct the process onto Mr. Haraj, given the controversies that were out in the public domain about Mr. Wells. And that was one of the issues about the process that Mr. Gama was contesting.
And it was also dealing with the delegated powers, whether were they
Yes, whether he
correctly
had the
delegated.
delegated powers. And he did have it, yeah.
Yes, and one can see that from paragraph 3 of the judgment, Mr. Chair, page 115, which provides that Mr. Maharaj's decision are challenged in proceedings brought by way of application before this court. They are challenged on the grounds that the current acting group chief executive of Transnet, Mr. Wells, could not delegate his admitted authority in such matters to Mr. Maharaj. The applicant contends that only the full board of Transnet could take the decision to bring disciplinary proceedings against him or authorize his suspension. Those were the issues which were crystallized before the High Court.
Yes.
And Mr. Chair, for completeness, you can also see that from paragraph 5 on page 116, which provides that the factual basis underpinning the legal challenge is that Mr. Wells was precluded from delegating the decision-making power to bring disciplinary proceedings against Mr. Gama, or to suspend him by reason of Mr. Gama's own accusations against Mr. Wells, and that Mr. Wells' alleged involvement in the process continued to have an influence over the board and did assert itself over one of the board's appointed subcommittees. In short, Mr. Wells' involvement in the process, however, tangentially rendered the entire process tainted. That was the essence of the application.
Yes, that was the essence of the application.
And reference is also made on paragraph 6 to the extract of the replying affidavit of Mr. Gama in order to ventilate the challenge that was before the High Court. Am I correct?
Correct.
Yes. Now, this matter was fully ventilated before the High Court, and may I refer you to page 161. The concluding paragraph starts from page 160 by the judge, by the Honorable Judge. Can you see? Ms. Hogan, are you still with me?
Yes.
If you can speak into the mic when you
Yes, I am.
provide the
Sorry.
answers, that will
Been a
help.
long day, yeah?
We are just about to finalize, Ms. Hogan, for the day. So page 160, paragraph 118 to paragraph 120 summarizes the conclusions of the judge, and ultimately the order that was made is to be found on page 161, paragraph 121, and it reads as follows: accordingly make the following order. I accordingly make the following order. The application is dismissed with cost, including the cost of the first to the third respondent and of the fourth to the 13th respondents, including the 10th and excluding the 10th and the 11th respondents, such cost to include the cost of to counsel, something which we like to hear as counsel when we win. So that is correct?
Correct.
Yes. Now we know that flowing from there, the challenge by Mr. Gama did not succeed before the High Court.
Yes. And the High Court also found no evidence of bias against Mr. Gama.
Yes. Now, may I refer you to, just want to follow the note. Yes, Mr. Gama was ultimately dismissed by Transnet subsequent to a disciplinary process that was undertaken.
Correct.
May I refer you to Annexure J,
Page
What page?
page 162.
162. Yes. On there.
And these are the findings in the disciplinary hearing against Mr. Gama. Ms. Hogan?
Correct. It was an arbitration process according to the,
Yes.
the thing, it was an arbitration process, yeah.
May I refer you to page 359?
Yes.
And that is where you'll find the conclusions and the summary of the findings by Advocate D.M. Anthrobas, SC, who was the chair of the disciplinary inquiry.
Correct. And
And at paragraph 435, he says that I understand that these findings are in the nature of a recommendation to Transnet. In summary, and for reasons fully set out above, I find Gama guilty of misconduct on charges 1, 2, and 4. And this is in line with what you've testified, that he was found guilty on 3 charges.
yes,
And on paragraph 436, it says as these findings have dealt only with the merits of the misconduct charges. The issue of what sanction ought to be imposed in consequence of the findings of misconduct, which have now been made, is to be considered under Transnet Disciplinary Code and Procedure in a separate proceedings, as was the arrangement which was made with the parties at the close of the previous hearings.
yes.
Now, what was the ultimate sanction?
The sanction, there was a separate hearings on sanction. They did not, the findings on that sanction, the sanctions imposed, was on the basis of negligence, that Mr. Gama had not applied his mind to the two locomotive, to the contracts, and he was dismissed on each of the 3 charges. They said each charge would have warranted a dismissal.
Ms. Hogan, I'm posing the following questions out of my sheer ignorance and for your guidance. Now, the Mr. Gama that you are referring to in your testimony,
Yes?
who you say was fired from Transnet on the 28th of June 2010 as per paragraph, I think, 51 of your witness statement. Is it the same Mr. Gama who was re-employed by Transnet as a group CEO and recently fired by Transnet?
Yes,
Is it the same person?
it's the same person.
Well, he was he was dismissed around June 2010. Is that right? The sanction of dismissal, was it imposed by or decided upon by the board or by an independent person in the same way as the findings of guilt had been decided by an independent advocate?
It was an independent process, yeah.
Do you know whether it was the same advocate who had dealt with?
No. It was a different advocate.
It was a different
that
advocate.
dealt with arbitration,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. And from the answer you gave to Mr. Mokoena just now, he was later on appointed, that is Mr. Gama, as Group CEO
Well-
of Transnet?
Well, Mr. Gama was fired at the end of 2010. I was fired by the president at the end of October 2010.
Yeah, you said end of 2010 for Mr. Gama. Is it not around June 2010?
Mr. Gama was fired on June 2010. I was then fired
Yeah,
in October, end of October 2010.
yes.
Mr. Brian Molefe was then appointed as the CEO of Transnet
Yes.
in, I think it was January or so. And then Mr. Gama was reappointed as the CEO of Transnet Freight Rail. It was a couple of months later, on the grounds that they had reviewed the sanction and that they'd had an independent review. I don't quite know what that was about. And that the board felt that the sanction that had been applied was too harsh.
This was now a different board from the one that was in
Yes.
existence during your time.
This was the board that had been appointed by Minister Gigaba, who succeeded me.
In effect, overturning a decision to dismiss Mr. Gama that had been taken by an independent party.
Yes. And he was out of the organization and then
Yes.
reappointed.
Yes, thank you.
You have actually testified on this issue, or it's recorded also on page 13, may I refer you to page 13, paragraph 51? Are you there?
Yes?
You say on paragraph 51, after Mr. Gama had been found guilty, a separate independent hearing on what sanctions should be applied found that the charges were serious enough to warrant dismissal on each charge. Accordingly, on the 28th June 2010, Mr. Gama was fired from Transnet.
Correct.
You confirm that?
Yes.
Now, may I refer you to Annexure K on page 360, Mr. Chair?
I'm with you.
Getting there. Now, who prepared this memorandum?
This memorandum was prepared by my department. It was a submission to Cabinet for the appointment of a new board to Transnet.
And I see that on page 365, if you can go there.
Yes?
You signed that memorandum on the 27th October 2010.
Yes, yeah.
What was the purpose of this memorandum?
The memorandum was to appoint non-executive directors to the Transnet board.
And what happened to this memorandum ultimately, to Annexure K?
Well,
Was it ever discussed by Cabinet?
well, once again, the Cabinet Secretariat, when I put this into the process, the 27th wasn't the first date. The Cabinet Secretariat said the President wants to speak to you about this. So we had a telephonic conversation about that. He wanted the name of 2 chairpersons, not 1. And he wanted the CVs.
I'm sorry, I think I missed something. Who is he?
The President. So the Cabinet Secretariat when I was processing this memo for the appointment of Transnet directors,
This is connecting with your earlier evidence that around July, the then president had asked you to give him 3 names. So this is connecting with that.
well, no, this is the following year. It's
Oh.
1 year later.
Okay.
So now the president has said, I can't go ahead until Gama's dismissed. Gama's dismissed. I sent the details of the judgment, the entire judgment to the president, and started processing a cabinet memorandum for the appointment of a new Transnet board.
Now, this is now post Mr. Gama being dismissed.
Yes.
Yes.
A new cabinet memorandum. Once again, the cabinet secretariat contacts me and says the president would like to discuss this with you. A telephonic conversation takes place, and he wants to see the CVs. He wants the names of 2 chairpersons, and he also wants to see the CVs. I was also processing a cabinet memorandum for the appointment of directors to the board of SAFCO, the forestry company. And he wanted to see the CV of the person that I was recommending for the chairperson of SAFCO. Accordingly, I sent him those CVs and once again heard nothing. And so on September, and you know, I pointed out again the centrality of Transnet. Once again, on the 10th of September and on the 11th, I sent reminders that I needed to meet with the president. I sent reminders to his office, heard nothing.
May I refer you to page 366, Annexure L?
367.
366.
6, yes. Yes,
So, just to follow on your chronology, you sent the memorandum that you have now spoken about, and subsequent to that, there was no reaction from the president. Then you went on to send what you termed to be a reminder. Is this the one on page 366?
yes. This is a letter that I sent to the president after our conversation,
And
stressing...
in this letter, you are raising serious issues on governance within the Transnet. Do you agree?
Yeah. Transnet needs. The AGM is coming up again. The last AGM, we weren't able to appoint anyone. We can't go a second year now without appointing. And I point out the importance of the Transnet, to the company, and I say then to confirm, in respect of the position of the chairperson, where he had asked for several names, I raised the 2 candidates and I gave him the names, and both of their CVs are attached.
Ms. Hogan, may I suggest, because there are quite important issues which you have stated in this letter, may I suggest that you read these paragraphs
Okay,
in order for one to appreciate the serious issues that you are conveying to the president in the time,
Yes.
and the importance of appointing the board at the time.
Yeah.
Having regard to your evidence that it was now over a year that no appointments were made in appropriate positions.
yes, I convey that to the president.
Can you please read this?
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry. Mr. Mkwena, it is about 4:30. If we are going to go into tomorrow, I'm hoping you are still available, Ms. Hogan.
Yeah.
I'm quite amenable if that's an important point that we adjourn and we start with that point tomorrow.
Yes,
Is that fine?
that's appropriate. We may
Yes.
adjourn.
Because otherwise we go beyond 4:30. All right, then we are going to adjourn at this stage, and we will resume tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. So if you will be here again tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. We adjourn.
Thanks.